I don't fear men disliking me for those values because, frankly, they should fear me disliking them for not having those values. Hi, I'm Summer Tothill. Every week on my Instagram, I run a Q&A with my followers. They ask me their questions about how gender equality and oppression is affecting them in their world, and I answer. What you're about to watch or listen to is a compilation of 1 week's worth of those questions and answers. How did you find your partner and how did you qualify his feminism? For those who don't already know, I have a boyfriend, a long-term boyfriend. We've been together for 3.5 years, and he is definitely a feminist. He is actually kind of an integral part of the support structure of the work that I do here. He helps me get it done. And as a feminist and a boyfriend, he has never once questioned the validity of the complaints that I have about patriarchy or misogyny or anything like that. However, the way that I found him may not be so helpful to you because it happened by accident, I'm afraid to say. We met through mutual friends while neither of us was looking. But it just so happens that the friends that we met through probably did help me in vetting him because they were all a group of queer people, both gender diverse and cis gay people. And I knew that him having close friends in those communities probably recommended him as a cis het man. I don't think that we should be exploiting queer communities for us to go out and find our cis het men. But I do think that men being genuinely friends with and valuing and appreciating queer people does potentially indicate that they are open-minded, don't hew too closely to gender roles, and are capable of seeing, humanizing, valuing, and assisting people who don't have the same privilege that they have. So that was one way that I was able to qualify his feminism, but the other way was just in being really explicit about my values and just gathering his reaction on that. So I always talk very explicitly about feminism, about patriarchy and misogyny, and I do not pretend that I don't have those values because I don't fear men disliking me for those values because, frankly, they should fear me disliking them for not having those values. So the harder you can push with values that tend to challenge men, the more you will be challenging whether they are good men or not and finding that out for real. Because it's one thing for men to say, I'm, a leftist, progressive, a feminist, but they actually have to walk the talk. The way that I tested him walking the talk was actually judging him by his behaviors. So it was all well and good for him to have queer friends, to self-identify as a feminist, to self-identify as very progressive in his politics, but actually I had to see it in action. So it was things like in our early days hanging out with each other, we went to the Black Lives Matter rally, we've gone to pro-Palestine marches. He would literally help me to research concepts that I was looking into for making my content. So I'd be getting, stuck in some statistic about domestic violence, and he would literally go and spend an afternoon deep diving statistics of a specific thing and then send them to me and go, here's what I think is the data that you need. Literally practically helping. Because I think that's the thing after all, is not what they say, what they do. And sometimes what they do is what they say in terms of it does matter what language a man uses around you and to you, but how they behave and how they support you is really the most important thing. Do they actually get up and wash the dishes after dinner? Do they speak highly of all the women around them? Do they have platonic female friends who they really value and support that has absolutely no undertone? It's just about developing systems of vetting men and then sticking really closely to your boundaries and to your standards. Can sexual assault cause sexuality questioning, and how can we tell the difference? Firstly, if you have been sexually assaulted, I'm very sorry to hear that someone chose to do that to you. Nothing you did caused that to happen, and that person could have chosen to act differently, and they didn't. That's all. Now, you have a two-part question. Can being sexually assaulted cause people to question their sexuality? I'm not an expert in this, but I have heard from psychologists and other experts that this definitely happens. There have definitely been cases of men who believed themselves to be gay because they were sexually assaulted by men when they were young, and they thought that because they had some sort of sexual response to that happening, that they must be attracted to men, and it can be very thorny to unpack and unpick that response in their adult lives. Similarly, sometimes people who have been sexually assaulted as children can grow up to think that they are asexual. Not to imply in any way that asexuality is not a valid sexuality, I'm just using it as an example in this case. But it can be really so closely tied to their experience of not having that control over their sexuality or having someone else defining their sexual experiences as a young person that, again, it can take them well into their adulthood to actually sort out what their genuine sexual orientation is. It doesn't help that we grow up in a, compulsive heteropatriarchal society as well. So even people who have not been sexually assaulted as children can struggle to work out what their sexuality is if it isn't, cis and straight. I can't answer for you how to tell the difference. That is something you're going to have to work out with a therapist, maybe a sex therapist, or with a trauma therapist. And yeah, it's definitely important to seek professional help if this is something that you are questioning about yourself. I wish you the best of luck, and I think that you can find your answers. Men who stop wanting sex with their female partner, why? Well, I'm afraid to say this is a question that can only ever be answered by the man in question who has stopped wanting sex with his partner. And it has to be asked by the partner, perhaps in the context of therapy. I know that sounds unhelpful and maybe obvious, but there's a reason why I wanted to say that. And that is because it is harmful and reductive for us to think that there is some overarching reason why any individual man would stop wanting sex. And I think that it is related to and springs from our cultural narrative and assumption that men are what Dan Savage would call testosterone-soaked dick monsters who want sex all the time. Men are human. They contain multitudes. So men and women are encouraged to see men as people who want sex all the time, and their sexual desire and their libido is something that we are trained to rely on. And for women, it is just up to us to either say yes or no, because they will always be available and they will always want it. But that's not true. It's not true. Men are subject to factors affecting their libido just like women are, and maybe they are not the same factors, and maybe they are not statistically and typically the same patterns and reasons, but it's still complex. I know that a lot of men tend to lose a bit of their libido from watching too much porn, for example, and from really destroying their ability to enjoy sex in a natural way, but that is not always the case, and we can't just assume that that's the reason either. Ultimately, I think for gender equality, we have to make sure that we're seeing everybody as fully human and not just making assumptions about their behavior and their libido. For example, one thing that we know in recent years from some good studies is that women tend to get sick of their male partner sexually well before men get sick of their female partner. So it's actually women who maybe seek sexual variety more than men, or it's that the gender dynamic between men and women turns the relationship into something that puts the woman off quicker and makes her want to seek sort of a new, fresh, exciting, maybe younger man, a more helpful man, quicker. So actually the things that we assume we know about men are wrong. We also are wrong about men being more visual creatures. Ultimately, it's a really complex subject, and I think if this is happening in your relationship, now would be the time to seek some couples therapy and maybe a sex therapist. That's it for this Q&A. Thank you so much for listening. Find me on Instagram at summertothill. That's summer with an O, spelt the same way as you see in this YouTube channel. I can't wait to see you there.